Hey everybody, welcome to the June 21st Tinderbox meetup. We only have one more left for the month of June, which is crazy. Welcome. So what we're going to do in the meetups is we go around the room and we talk about tools for thought, personal knowledge management, and our individual projects we're working on. We typically will introduce new people if they're here. Today they're not. If we have a theme, we would then jump into that, which we don't. So we'll just go around the room and talk about various projects today. If no one saw the last week's meetup, it was probably one of the best ones we've had in a couple of years.
Hmm.
I mean, honestly, it was just absolutely fantastic. And it wasn't as much about Tinderbox specifically, but it was about the use of AI and multiple AIs in the context of knowledge management, run by a Dr. Andy Bland, a nephrologist, and just really, really well thought out view on how to use all of these various tools to make your personal knowledge management journey more effective and efficient. So I highly recommend you take a look at that. Um, yeah, I've actually planned to talk about a bit some of the projects I've kicked off this week as inspired from that talk. So that will be kind of fun to do. But with that in mind, it's going to be more of an ad hoc discussion today. So let's start off with Mark Anderson because he can't stay the whole session today. And so, Mark, maybe you can share the screen, show
Yeah,
the
yeah. Okay.
post part of this dialogue, and then Mr.
Yeah.
Hurst, you're now back with your coffee. Before we kick in, do you want to say any words or words of wisdom or anything on your mind right now?
Just that last week, which I unfortunately had to drive a parade float for, uh, what was a dynamite meetup.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so viewers should certainly find that's Sunday, June 15th, I believe.
yeah.
Uh, but highly recommended. Some of the most interesting and sensible remarks on uh, use of AI in Tinderbox I've heard.
Agreed. Agreed. Yeah, and I was just saying, it's funny you said it because I actually preambled that as well before you came back with your coffee. I thought it was probably one of the best ones we've done in a couple of years. Um, Mr. Anderson, take it away.
Okay. Um, where are we? We've got this one. So forum member was asking about something that I can absolutely see how easy this turns out because you think I've got tags. Everyone knows what tags are. They're just keywords. So all I just thought, the thing I just need is I want the all my tags to link to their tag. Which is fine, except there are a number of, as the sort of conversation went into it, actually had to unpick a number of different things. So the basic thing, making the link, isn't really the challenge here.
Uh, be-
Um,
Before you get into even the technology, Mark, what does it mean to link to a tag? That's what to another
well,
note,
because it,
to a note where
yeah,
that tag
well,
exists. What
that
does that
that was one of the first questions I asked. The assumption is, okay, so when it turned out, well, there is a tag, but it's not necessarily linked inside the document. Now, people, you've made some really interesting and a much richer tools, some of the libraries you've done, where if you declare a sort of some kind of a tag or a term, it's auto-created and auto-linked. But in this scenario, someone isn't doing something of such depth, but they've got tags, which is a built-in, they've got a list of tags, it's a built-in attribute. And what they want to do is they want to link to the notes that they have that is about that. The assumption being, to my reading of it, is that this is something that essentially just happens. But there are all sorts of things to consider. Is that okay? Well, you may have made a note for each, or perhaps even just some of the tags.
Yeah, and
But
Mark, and what do we mean link from to and from where is where I was confused about when he said
well,
link.
here's the thing. I'm just explaining that. So the idea is they want an HTML link in a web page to go from the page that they have to something about that tag. Well, here's the thing. Um, do you even have a note that has that tag? They didn't say so. I assume they did. The question is, where is it? Because because they're not linking to it. If it was linked inside the document, that would be easy. You can use export codes and things for that. But in this case, we've surfaced the assumption that we've got a note where we want to make a list of the tags. The tag values do occur somewhere in the document as a note. So how do we connect all that up? Well, you need to unpack a couple of things. So you need to know where you made the tags. I'm going to assume they're all in the same container, because if you've littered them all over the document, you have a further problem. You need to know whether you've set those tag notes to export, and you need to know whether you use the same name casing in your notes as you did in your tags value. It's remarkably easy to just assume that something else will take care of the case that I use lowercase here and uppercase there, or I've got a name that's got some odd value that export drops out. So when I make a link to that note, it doesn't work, because it doesn't actually go to the note I thought it would. So those are the points I'd sort of surfaced in the thing, and that's what's in this file that I just pointed out earlier. And essentially, it's not particularly difficult to do, as long as those assumptions are true. You know where the tags are, and you can assume that the casing of the path in the exported HTML from the document is consistent with the path and case used in the document. And in that case, essentially, we can make a bit of stub text. So we got an open an unordered list and close that unordered list, and then we just iterate tags using .each, and we make a list item for it. We open up a link, and at the end we close that, and we close the link item. And in the middle, what we do is we take the path of the tag value that we're after, for which we know there's a note, and we use that as the visible title of the link. And we need to do a little bit of extra work there to make the HTML work. And then we can just put all this together as a bit of text and drop it here into our export. And I can show you. Let me open up here's the demo that I basically made. So we've got a note, and it's got some tags. I've got tags in a different place, and here are the tags. I'm not using all of them. In this case, I've got 2, and when I go and preview it, it links, and it does link because this is now going to the exported HTML. In this case, it's done behind the curtain. I've set it up so it uses internal, so that if anyone downloads this, it'll just work. But more realistically, you're probably exporting this to maybe your hard drive, and then that basically is a minimum amount of work. Now, if you had a richer set of setup, such as with your term extraction, you probably wouldn't need to do this, because it's already sort of covered by the fact that when you make the term, you link to it, because you're doing other stuff, and so you get this sort of linkage for free. But if you don't, and if you just want something light and simple, this is the simplest way I can think that you can do it. The bit that's counterintuitive at first sight is you might think, first of all, well, isn't there an export code for this? There isn't, because you're assuming that the Tinderbox will guess a link that you haven't told it about, that you actually want to link one note with another, but you haven't done anything inside the document to say that, but you want to construct an export. So we can get around that, because we can do it inside action. So here we are at the top of our template using a !action section that allows us to do some action code inside the template. And so lo and behold, we iterate through the tags, because we know where the things are that we want to act on, and then we just make up a little HTML list around it. So it's not a replacement for anything richer, but it's just an attempt to answer the question in the simplest possible way in terms of the minimum number of things that you might need to use to get at it. Does that help? You are muted.
It does and it doesn't. Honestly, for me, because for those that are new to this and have no idea what you're seeing or looking at, I could see people being super, super confused. If they're not familiar with what's happening here, and I would think it would be helpful if we could, demonstrate an example. So, like, I created a note, like you've got projects there,
Yeah.
and and you've got a note called X, and in that note called X, you added the attribute tags, and you threw in, and tags as a list, and you threw, or as a set, I can't remember, and you
Yeah, well,
threw.
that's what's in the thread that we're discussing. So that much was sort of set
No,
for us.
for those that are watching the video and haven't seen the thread, and so you've now thrown in a couple items in that tags list, and so aka also known as keywords, terms, whatever you might want it to be. And the and this is where I got stuck. So I think what I'd like to have us start with in reflecting back on the conversation is, before you do anything, before you think about code, before you think about action code, before you do anything, ask yourself, what is it that you actually are trying to do? Right. And in some ways, and I find this really, really helpful, write it down on a piece of paper. Like, I want this kind of output, right? Or I want to see the items that are in these tags in this way. So do I want a bulleted list? Do I want a bulleted list that then links to some notes that actually put a definition for that tag? Um, do I want to move those tags somewhere else? So I think that's kind of where I would
Sure.
encourage people to start. So maybe you can talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, well, I think part of the my suspicion is, and I'm obviously guessing on behalf of somebody else, but I think a suspicion comes that for lots of people, so as you say, sort of tags, keywords, there are all sorts of terms, but they're generally the same thing. Lots of applications have them. Because lots of applications have things in slightly different versions or different ways of implementation, we tend to fall back on assumptions that we don't just test. So my starting assumption here was, okay, so I've got these tags. Well, obviously somehow the tags can be exported. Well, yes, but possibly I might have been working with a tool that just does this and it only does it for tags, and therefore I don't have to do anything. Here, although tags is effectively a proxy for the common notion of having a sort of keyword bucket for all your tools, it isn't the case that Tinderbox then automatically goes off and makes notes for every possible list attribute that you add or every value of it, because, well, that way madness lies, because you then have a different problem. You've got all this extra stuff you didn't ask for. So you're absolutely right that if you're starting this as a sort of coming to this afresh as somebody else's problem, you might say, yeah, no, I should have thought about that bit first. But if you just start sitting there thinking, I've got these tags, why can't I sort of export them? The bit to take away from here is you need to make sure there's something to link to. So if you're going to link to a tag that you've put out there, a note for which you've made a note, that's fine. You might find it easier to also link inside the document, because then you can leverage link export mechanisms that are handled in export code. But in this case, it's probably neater, because, for instance, you might have other links in note X here. You might have other basic links, and you might have other text links, in which case it isn't possible via an export code to filter that and say, I only want you to give me this document's text links, but of a certain link type.
Well, and as I listen to you, I also hear you making this underlying assumption of export, which I've been known to do. And in past meetups, I've been like, the nail sticking up and being hammered down, right? Because there are many in the community that don't ever use export, don't want to use export, are not trying to get their stuff out of Tinderbox. They just want to see it.
But
And
preview muddies the water, of course, because for a
but
lot of people,
but yeah,
they're
preview is export, right? But that's what
yeah,
people don't understand.
yeah.
And so again, but that's where I go back to that point though of the more you can be clear on what you want and why you want it, then you can help the community get you the answer you need.
Sure. I mean, I think the answer to your general question here, the thing to understand is if you're going to use preview/export, is to not just assume that things are auto-linked for you.
Correct.
Which is a perfectly, I mean, the thing is, it's a perfectly, in a sense, reasonable assumption to make. It happens to be wrong, but in terms of the other tools that one might be using, I think it is, and I don't think it's an error, and it's not an error on the part of the app that doesn't do it. It just so happens that it's an assumption that is not best made, and there are a number of ways you can do it. I've used the simplest possible way here without doing more work. Now, possibly, if I was doing it, I'd probably go down rather your route, and I'd do some auto extraction, I'd set up notes, and I'd do linkage, because actually you're probably going to want those links for some other reason. But if that's not what you're doing, and you just want these links, possibly just to export some pages, because there's another, the guy's actually posted another note. He's doing some stuff with the Zettelkasten notes, which I think are outside Tinderbox. So it may be he's made these notes elsewhere. So, for instance, there's nothing to say that that tags has to exist. I mean, it would be harder to do, but we could simulate this even without there being the target notes. If I knew that where I was going to export my page to had a folder called tags with a note in it already, I could link to those. It's more complicated, but it depends what you want to do. And it again gets to, as the point you rightly make, it's about, well, what assumptions are you making about how stuff just works? And that's no badness on anyone's part, but it's just that it turns out often the things we just assume are the case are not.
Okay.
I see hands up.
All right, Art, you had a question. Just to be clear, the preview export file is built and rebuilt every time we switch to the kind of. So so Art, one of the things that we've been talking about in the backstage is preview. I want to be clear when I update it. So preview renders a version of the template that has been the preview renders a version of the note. And
Okay.
and current but let's be clear about the expectations there, because I'm running into an issue that I've reported in the backstage several times. For Tinderbox to optimize its use, it will preview a note and will assume the note has not changed unless the text or the name of the note has changed. However, in my incredibly complex publishing system, I'll just call it that, I will manipulate a massive amount of rendering in a template that is not affecting the name of the note or its text. In which case, by the way, we're seeing you pulling up the if you can stop sharing screen, I guess, Mark.
Okay. Yep.
We are, and so what that means is, quite often I will run into situations where my template will generate an output that is actually successfully rendered in the export code. It's actually, if you click on the export tab, it is successfully getting exported, but it is not being previewed because Tinderbox hasn't been forced to update the file that it's cached for the preview. And I've been
but the file exists on the Finder.
Yeah, no. So no, the file. So what happens? So let's go through the process. You preview a note. Tinderbox creates a cached HTML version of that note in its support folder, unless you've told it to export it somewhere else. And we can actually, it might be easier to demonstrate this.
Yeah, Michael, are you confident that this is still a concern in the new version?
No, because the new version that came out a couple days ago, I haven't tested.
Yeah, I think that this is actually addressed in 10.2.
Awesome.
But if you think you can replicate this in the forum, I think it would be more efficacious to make me a test case.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think we might have addressed it. But but the point being is so the issue I was having is preview wasn't the cached page of preview wasn't actually refreshing to what was actually being exported. And that's what we've just I think Mark's saying we just solved that. So I haven't
Okay. So what you're saying though is that until now it was the case that the file would be sort of spit out to the Mac OS, but within Tinderbox the preview window wasn't reflecting the updated
so what would happen,
result.
to be clear in language, it wasn't being spit out to the Mac OS. A cached version of the HTML was being placed on the hard drive, and that file was being previewed in preview like any other browser. But Tinderbox isn't a full browser, right? So the export code would be dutifully rendering the content, but preview what the cached page would not necessarily have been updated in the view. But apparently Mark has refreshed that for me, so I shouldn't have an issue anymore.
Yeah.
Okay. So now that, sorry, go ahead.
No, just to say, the issue at hand is what triggers tell Tinderbox that, oh right, you know, rather than do everything all the time and have sort of stuff churning away in the background, essentially Tinderbox makes a perfectly pragmatic thing, saying, okay, fine, there's been a change here. Two things that some of sort of deeper use had thrown up is, well, the template might change even if the note doesn't, and what things are treated as a change. And I think to date, until the most recent changes, originally it was sort of text and title, then it became text, title, and displayed attributes, and that's been pushed out because it transpires in the way that Michael's been describing, that actually there are other things that might be changing. The classic one is changing the template. And especially if you're doing something like the thing we were just looking at, where we're doing action code in the template, it's obvious to us where we changed it. It's not necessarily so obvious to the application that's done, and signaling that. So sometimes it's a case that you just you want to sort of press a refresh button, because I'm not going to make you guess. I know and you can't guess. Please do it. And you can sort of do that often by just pressing the tab of the view you're on. But by and large, the app does get it right, and I know the developer works hard on our behalf to try and do that. But it's a constant balance thing, and the more complicated work we do, for instance, doing these sort of, in a sense, almost what you might say is hybrid templates, where we've got action code going on as well as export code, which wasn't what templates used to do way back when, that it becomes much less clear when there's a change. And consider some of the work some of us do where we use includes. So we're actually we're transcluding other templates that are rendering other notes, which may or may not have changed somewhere in that stack. And suddenly it actually becomes a lot more complicated than we'd imagine with, just one note and one template.
And then if you think about it, you have 10,000 notes, all with their own rules and their own edicts, all running, and you're trying to get that stuff going simultaneously. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes in some context.
Yeah, I can see that it's so complicated. But just so I understand for my simple needs, say I have a note and I have a template, and I'm working on that note and I make a few edits to the note. When can I expect, what do I have to do in order to make sure that that note is updated on the drive? And the second question is, if I'm then making changes to the template without changing the name text or displayed attributes of the note itself, when can I expect the updated version
of
the export file to be on the drive?
It sounds like, based on my the issues I was running into, Mark's fixed that in the issue. So the answer is you should be able to expect it in real time now.
It depends. If you're previewing, you're actually update. By default, everything happens behind the curtain because lots of people don't want to do export. But I think you'll actually talk about export. It's the same thing, but you just say, no, I want to actually see those files, and I want them in this particular place. The next question comes that if you change something and you're not previewing the page, then you'll need to re-export, because Tinderbox isn't going to go away and make a page you didn't ask for. If you preview
Okay.
it has to do that update in order to show you the preview. So
Yeah.
if you've just changed one page, the easiest way might be to just preview it. Yeah, that looks all right, that's done, and you won't have to export it because it's already been exported. It's more obvious
Okay.
after the fact.
Okay. Okay, fine, fine. So I'll just preview it there. And then, of course, I can also use Mark 2, right?
Yes.
To catch the stream.
Yes.
Okay, perfect, perfect. Thanks so much.
Okay. On yeah, that's a totally issue. I don't want to complicate it. There is another issue that comes into play when you're trying to use Tinderbox as a like a PowerPoint as a slide projector. And if you're linking to a note that has not yet been previewed, that link won't work until the file is actually until that note that image has previously been previewed. But I'm working on workarounds like that. All right, David and Mark, you've had your hands up for ages.
So my primary application is Daylight that has a contact manager. I assume. See, Michael, you're aware of it. Has anybody else here used Daylight? Know what it is? Don't everybody speak at once. It's a contact manager.
Yeah.
So
Right.
my professional role is hunting, and so I keep track of people that have esoteric skills and interests, exotic software languages in their ill-gotten past. And Daylight has a very, very powerful and useful tagging facility, but no means of actually managing it. The managing of it is entirely left to me. And redundancy is a real problem. I looked at the list of tags from about 4 years ago, and there's up to 649. I think the last time I looked is up around 800. Enormous amount, tremendous amount. I would say, well, I haven't looked. I'm scared to look. At least I would guess 10% plus of redundancy. Prime example, I refuse to use the term ontology because I think it's completely bullshit, particularly in the environment where I work. So if someone is spouting ontologies, I tag it as semantic. If someone else were to use my tagging system, so far I'm the only one who uses it, they would not know that undocumented subtlety.
Mm-hmm.
So, and this to me, well, another question: anybody here ever heard of the tagging or naming construct of prime modifier class?
No.
Okay, everybody uses it. Customer account number.
Okay.
That's basically left to right, major to minor. Customer, account, number. So the right, the suffix kind of indicates what it is: a number, an index, account, currency, something like that. There are under 3 dozen, more like 2 dozen kinds of data. And then on the left, customer is you're trying to set the greater context. When you name things on balance, by the way we use English, you will probably be using a prime modifier class. And Michael obviously used it too, but you put the class word on the left as a prefix, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I make no, in reality, it really shouldn't, it doesn't make any difference if you want to have left or right. It's just, which the problem is, and this is the problem, we're inconsistent. And I want a system that forces me to be consistent. That's my rant. So thank you, Mark, and is Cathy involved with Tinderbox? How did you, I dare ask that where you kind of came across Cathy Marshall.
Well, Cathy Marshall's a researcher formerly at Park, who wrote one of the systems that inspired Tinderbox.
Okay.
And she's spoken at a few Tinderbox events.
And what has been her profession?
Started out as a software developer and designer, researcher, at the best industrial lab of its era, and then went to Microsoft,
Oh dear.
and then and is now writing the biography of one of the Beat poets.
Excellent. And the best in your scheme, the best industrial lab was
Xerox PARC.
Oh yes, okay, yes.
And there is a quite good Tinderbox meetup with Cathy Marshall in the archive.
Okay, because Simeone went through. I think he went through PARC, and then whatever to Microsoft, and but anyway, again, this is in my domain. This is naming conventions. Naming, how do you automate the process? So I have enough redundancy problems myself, because in theory, I'm thinking about the stuff I'm thinking about. If you bring someone else into the game, all bets are off. So that's my pursuit, and thank you for that reference. Over and out.
All right. Okay, and Mr. Bernstein, you had your hand up for quite some time.
Yeah, I've got a stylistic question that I think might be interesting to talk about. Mark's solution, which I think of as actually Michael Becker's style, is to do an action in the template that sets some local variables, which we then reference by value later on. My proposal was to do the work in a function that returns the values that you're interested in. And I think that that's an interesting question. Why might it be better to do stuff in the template, and why might it be better to do stuff in the function?
So say that again.
Well, there are two ways to do this. One is your way, which is start out the template with an action that sets some local variables. And then later in the template, you can refer to the values of those local variables.
Yeah.
My approach was to go write a function that would compute, in this case, the string we want to export. And then in the template, I simply refer to the value of calling that function.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And honestly, I typically end up with what you just said. So, well, my first so in my method, if I just need to quick and dirty get it done, I'll just whip it into the template, make sure it's right. And then as it matures, it becomes a function for me. Right. And that's effectively how I built my publishing system. So I think you're spot on. And then ultimately, once you get really good at it, that function becomes like a little independent recursive microservice, which then can be accessed by not just that single template, but by any note and by any template. And so you're in my opinion, you're absolutely right. That's a really nice mature way to get to do it. And in the context of lists, that's exactly how I went about building my automated list management system. Does that make sense for what Mark had proposed? We can also review that if anybody has any interest in going deeper on that.
One thing I would say is, yeah, I mean, I didn't use a function actually because I was in a hurry because I thought I was going out and I wanted to get a solution off to somebody. And there's a little bit more mise en place to setting it up, because you make the function, and at some point you still got to write the code to figure it out. Once you've made the code, yes, I totally agree. I think it might. I'm teaching myself because functions are actually sort of comparatively new to Tinderbox, and it's 24 odd years of life, and we've had functions for about 2, and so they open up a lot. And certainly, if nothing else, I think it makes for much cleaner templates. So instead of having all this stuff hidden away in the top of the template and having to remember that's where you did this, just having something in the template that says call this function, insert the output of this function, is actually much cleaner. And now we can do that. It's something that us older hands need to train ourselves to do more often.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. All right. Well, we've certainly gone through that quite a bit. Does anybody else have any other thoughts, comments? Hey, Dominique, nice to see you. It's been a while. You're on mute if you're going to chat. Okay. You're still on mute. Can't hear you. All right. So, anybody else have any other thoughts, comments, projects you've been working on that you want to share, discuss? We've got, where are we at time? We got about a, good 45 minutes or so to dig in and experiment with different thoughts or ideas.
Are
If
you
not,
working on something fun, Mike?
I am actually, as is always the case. So, I got to be careful with what I decide to show. So let me see if I can figure this out. One thing that I found really interesting was kind of riffing off of last week's. Let me take a big step back. So a lot of the projects I'm working on is one, you all know I've got a book contract that would not have happened were it not for Tinderbox. So thank you very much, Mr. Bernstein, for that. You've now just fed my family for the next 5 months. The so and the interesting thing I'm doing about all that is I'm collecting a bunch of primary source material, and that primary source material is in the form of press releases and articles written by the marketing team for this company. It's being driven from interviews that I'm doing with the staff of the company as well as partners and other companies. So I'm getting a bunch of audio interviews, which then will mean that I now need to find ways to assemble that information, bring it into Tinderbox so that I can kind of process it and work through it and go through the material. And so with that in mind, I started and then on the flip side, and maybe this is just my ADHD brain because I simultaneously work on multiple things at once. So one thing I'm also doing is I'm setting up a personal AI for my client so that when we launch the book, the very first page of the book is scan this QR code and have a conversation with let's call it virtual CEO. And so we're going to be training the AI on all of the materials that we're writing, this local AI that we're on all the materials that we're writing, so that someone can actually have a conversation with essentially with the book and with the virtual version of this individual. And so with that in mind, we're pushing out text documents out of Tinderbox into text files that we then can be uploading into the AI. So that's another some of the projects that we're going on. Then on top of all of that, we have a whole host of really interesting data that we're doing around just background information on the industry and structure. And so pulling all of those things together is what I've been working on. And so that's been pretty exciting. So maybe I can share some of that then as kind of a background. Let me share my screen. And to kind of set this, here, let me share my screen. And what we can, I got my mouse done. Sorry, my dogs are barking here. And so maybe I can, I'll show you too a little bit on how I'm eating my own dog food, in terms of using my own templates and previous work. So let's say, and again, because of confidentiality, I can't share with you the actual file. So in order to get some of the things I can share, and I got to reassemble a fresh Tinderbox file. So using my the templating system that I've been building, let's go ahead and let me quickly mock up a file and I'll show you how some of this works. So where is my foundational template? So I can go here, and what that does is that opens up my foundational template that I produced a while back, and I can paste this in. And so now what that does is that lets me load up a Tinderbox file with all of the elements I need to be able to have to be able to start writing an article and to be able to start writing a project. So what I've effectively just done is I've just set up and launched my foundational template. Then as I kind of do my work, some of the other foundational templates that I've built within the process is I have my advanced list library template, which really is all about pulling from terms. So I can go ahead and show you how I pull that in. So then I go ahead here, oops, and I install, whoops, come on. My mouse is going crazy here. Come on. I install this one. Go ahead and install that one. So that will let me install my list file. I don't know where come on. I got one of my screens is over writing a different one. I got to tile a window just a minute. Let's move it out of the way here. There we go. So let's go ahead now and close this one. And then the other big one, I won't go through all of them. The other big one is my media file, but I won't demonstrate that today. And this is the one I'll demonstrate today. Oops, no, there is my tabling one. So this gets really interesting. And it's oops, and it's especially effective for when you're doing this kind of initial background research. I find really effective. And I don't need to have those there, so we'll just launch that. Okay, so essentially what I've done now by pulling all these different elements into play is I've set myself up a Tinderbox file that lets me immediately start working with lists and management and tags and program. Oh, and I need one more, the automatic. We're not going to publish to Tinderbox. Where's my dynamic creation? Someone's out here, create link library. That's it. And then the last one, and this is a more advanced template that shows you basically what we were just demonstrating at the beginning of our call with a more advanced approach. Okay, so and then I have in each one of my modules, I have these little onboarding steps to get people going, but we'll just go ahead and delete those. So essentially now what we have is the ability to, and then we have to activate all of, I probably don't think we need to do this just now, but we'll just get started. All right, and then make sure all the libraries have been activated. All right, so everything should work now. So what that allows us to do now is I can now start writing my project and doing my work. And one of the things I was playing with is this. Now that I've got the templates, then I should be able to pull this over. It's funny how you, as projects incrementally formalize, it's funny how things work here. Let me see. Okay, and I'll demonstrate this then too. All right, so let's say I am opening up here, go to 5Cs, close that out, starting with thread. Get me a list of okay, just trying to clean things up so I can not. So let's say as part of my fundamental research for my security, what I'm doing here is I'm trying to say, give me the list. I'm asking ChatGPT to help me out. Give me a list of the top 10 data breaches in the last 5 years. And so we're seeing Chinese surveillance data leak, the impact of it, and a brief description and a source. So let's go ahead and just go with those for now. And then, like I said, this is great. I'm like, great, thanks. Let's be polite. I'm trying to learn how to do that. Can you give this to me in my Tinderbox parsable format, namely name, and then we kind of done this before, but before in meetups, but I can show you how this is working for me. So name, the section mark, year, date, impact.
Michael, date you type.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter. So if I go ahead and let's say source. All right. So I'm telling chat now to say, okay, you help me find that information. So now return this information in a way that I can easily parse it. And so I've now got this kind of this background source information. Okay, so I can go in here and let's say we're going to start a new project. New note. And we'll make this one a page. Okay. So now I've got a new note that we've generated with the information that I've just pulled in from chat, and it's broken up into those 3 areas. And so for now, let's go ahead and and you're kind of seeing my iterative process on how I go about, playing with this and how helpful it is. Whoops. How helpful it is to have like these pre-installers that we've been generating when you're kicking off a new project. So if I look at my P note prototype in this context, I'm saying, well, I'm missing a few attributes that I may want, so I can go ahead and put those in really quick. Namely, date publication is the key one here, and maybe source. Okay, and this is the kind of incremental formalization. So even if I've pre-installed the templates that I've previously used before for this particular project, I'm wanting to modify my base level template really quick. And so now I'm going to say I want to parse all of this into notes to make it really easy. Now there's a couple ways you can go about doing this. I could use the explode function and explode all of these notes at and have individualized notes. And let me pull over my, I'm going to go to my other file, which I can't show you, and pull out some action code so I can, yeah, this is the one I want. Okay, and we'll come over here. Over here. Okay, and in this file now, what I want to do is create a new, I'm going to paste in the action code I just did. And sorry, Dave, you want to espouse what you were saying there? It's very close to a problem posed by Boeing in 1988.
Just to comment, I mean, I will now try to get over my aversion of using ChatGPT to ask the same question that you asked. I mean,
yeah.
So whatever, 25, 30 40 years later, can ChatGPT handle the issue of the meaning of turnover?
What do you mean? I'm sorry.
What to you? What does the word turnover mean?
I don't think I used the word turnover. I said data breach. What are we talking about?
No, ranked by turnover. Oh, no.
You asking, give me a top 10, a list of top 10.
Yeah.
I rotated just a little bit. That. Thank you, Mark. You threw me off track.
Turnover.
Yeah, thank you. In British English, turnover is the word for sales, the top line in a financial statement. In American English, the top line is sales.
And
Right.
turnover is people sacked.
Right. And then if HR, how many people? Yeah, how many people did you sack? And there's
yeah, and you're right, and this is where you need to be clear and careful when you're doing this kind of interrogation. And as we learned last week, and Mark, Mark Anderson and I had a conversation about this on Thursday, and Mark particularly liked a term that Dr. Bland had raised, which was how did you word it, Mark? It requires an expert.
Oh no, it's his point about the subject matter expert.
Yeah.
And making the point that what we can't escape from is what was very clear from what he showed was the quality of what he was getting reflected his subject matter expertise in the subject and the preciseness of his prompts.
Correct.
So getting the intern to just write your prompts for you is not going to help you. If you're a highly skilled person in whatever field, you're not actually very fungible. And one of the things I took away from that meeting was, is this going to be like the equivalent, a new form of executive assistant, or a bit like having the I don't know, there are various terms and things, but you have the nurse practitioner or you have the legal assistant who isn't qualified in the subject but knows an awful lot about it. So could write probably 90% of it for you in a way that somebody you just, hired off Mechanical Turk or something couldn't do, because you need you need to have faith that if someone's doing this on your behalf, that they're halfway competent in the field. But that's a slight segue to things. But yeah, it was about subject matter expertise.
Yeah, and to that point, so in this request, so I'm doing this quickly for the sake of the demonstration and the work product that we're doing for today's meetup. But I spent over an hour with chat on this question of the top 10 data breaches yesterday, because to your point, David, well, what does top 10 mean? And is it a particular region around the world? Is top 10 based on number of records impacted, number of financial loss? There's all of these different kind of nuances that you have to bring to the table when you do that. And then even when you get the response back. So I was also looking at it for GDP outputs based on some work I was doing. And ChatGPT was pulling together multiple numbers. And I had a previous boss that honed in on me and it really trained me to look at these kinds of details, thankfully. And I was able to say, wait a minute, chat, your percentages, you said this number was 30 billion, and you said that XYZ was 20% of that, but then your sub numbers weren't right. And it's like, oh, you're absolutely right, I was doing my calculations wrong. And so you have to have this kind of conversation with chat. And again, I'm an expert in this market, so I knew it wasn't bullshit, but I also knew it wasn't right. And so I had to kind of iterate for about an hour or more with chat to kind of nuance the numbers to get it right. So in this demo, we're just doing it really quick. So long story short, based on the conversation that we kicked off with today, this is a kind of a really helpful nuanced model. So I could and let's kind of look at the code that I've gotten here, and I think everyone might find this really helpful. So I asked chat to give me a delimited list. I specifically used the section mark list because it's rarely used in any output unless it's for a very specific reason. And so I've asked chat to do that list. I've also asked, so essentially what I'm doing here, and I don't need my subtype. So I'm essentially saying, hey, chat, I want you to take each line and parse out each line. Now, if I wasn't using the each line operator, I would use explode every note into an individual note, and then parse them individually. And so what I'm going to have to tweak this a little bit, because this is a little bit in this context, I don't have a list that I'm splitting. So I'm just going to say, take each line and make that X, and create and give me, and what we're going to do is we're going to split. My delimiter is different, actually. We're going to split the list at the section mark. So we're going to create a list of X split by the section mark. So now I can start piecing that apart. And the first thing I want to do is I want to have chat. I don't need this one right now. Well, I want to have chat go and create a note, and we're going to have that note be variable string v note equals, and we're going to have it be vlist at 0. So what am I doing right now? What I'm saying is, hey, Tinderbox. So V0, when you're creating a list, and let's look at my list. This is a 0-10 base list. So the first item is 0. The second item right here is the second item here is a 1, and the third item is 2 up until the next break, and then the final item, the source, is 3. So I've got 4 items within the list. Yeah, and thanks, Mr. Bernstein. And so essentially, I'm going to say take 0 and make that the name of this idea called vnote. And then what I want to say is I want to say go create me vnote, and then change the value of vnote from its name to the path of the note you just created for me. Then I want you to make the name of vnote, and this is going to be redundant, so we don't need that one anymore. I want you to make the text of vnote equal to 1, 2, 3, spot 0, 1, 2. I want you to make the text of vnote to be 2. I want you to make the type of vnote is going to be data breach. We're not doing subtype in this context. I want you to make the prototype of vnote to pnote. And we're going to add in another one. I want you to make publication date. No. Date publication, sorry. Into number 1. Right. So if I did, and what I've done is I've kind of developed this methodology for myself so that I can go pull these kind of background primary assessments, primary research out of chat, parse it into lists that are delimited into formats that I can get. And it's allowing me to assess the industry and assess the methodologies, very, very quickly. And so now if I did this right, what this is going to do, it's going to take each one of these 10 paragraphs, aka lines, parse them out at the delimiter mark, create each one of the notes, populate the text, populate the date published, populate the type, and we missed one, and populate the URL with vlist 3. Okay. So now if we do that and we apply the stamp, I now have 10 notes with the date of the breach, the URL, and all of the notes. Now, that's pretty cool. Now what I want to be able to do is assess and work on that a little bit, and I can show you the next things I started doing this week as I was playing with it. And Mr. Bernstein, this would actually help in terms of my backstage request that I just made this morning. So it's good that we're kind of going through this. So let me pause here real quick before I move on. Anybody have any thoughts, comments, observations, questions, curiosities about what I was just doing?
No, I really like the way you parsed everything out and made your notes out of it. It's very quick and effortless, seems. Good job.
Yeah, and again, but by the way, and just so everyone is clear, maybe it's because I'm not the sharpest tool in the box. I mean, it's taken me months, weeks, hours to train ChatGPT, train my own self, and look for the consistent patterns. So what I've learned in using Tinderbox is the more you can create patterns like this, the more you can get more efficient and more effective for the tool. And it doesn't matter what the pattern is. It just matters that it's a pattern that you understand and that you can teach a Tinderbox to respond to. And I've narrowed down in on this section mark delineated list patterning. But that's and that's been useful for me. Now, with that in mind, so what I've essentially done now here too is now I want to be able to, and again, I can go ahead and render it. And what's happening right now is I'm not getting the template that I necessarily want. Oh, that one's fine. So you can see I can start previewing the notes and I can look at the notes. I can export this out to people. But now let's say I want to be, curating my research a little bit more. And I'm wanting to think about, actually, this is a great example. So let's say now as part of my research and part of my efforts, I'm now wanting to quickly triage all of the companies that are related to in one way or more to these data breaches. So that let's say that's the research question I have right now is, can I get a list of all of the companies, aka tags, based on the conversation we were just having in the beginning of the discussion, related to all of the companies, and how would I go about effectively and efficiently doing that? Before I disclose my quote unquote magic sauce, does anybody have any suggestions or ideas on how you would want to go about doing that? Automating it. So, because I hate doing things manually. So how would one go about automating that? Anyone want to take a guess, or should I just move on? All right, I'll move on. But before I do that, I also want to show you this. I'm going to go ahead and, because I installed my table template that I've previously generated, what I want to do, and here's two ways, by the way, to go about doing this. Let's say I wanted to quickly interrogate these notes as a table. I could go ahead, open them up, and look at the table view, and I can start manipulating this information based on the table view. But what if I wanted an output that I could quickly share with my client? And that's where I've come up with this as part of my 5C school, this table installer that you just saw me put into the file. So what I did was I created and installed the P table template that I've generated, and that P table template is being powered by my advanced table library that I've previously produced. And so now what I need to do is I can say, well, Tinderbox, what do I want actually displayed in the table? So if I go and show that table right now, it's just giving me the names of the notes. So what I can actually say is, what I want displayed in the table is I want the date, publication, date, and I want the text description, and I want the and it should be a semicolon, and I want the source, so URL source. Okay, so what my library function is doing to generate tables for me, and by the way, this took me 10 years plus 5 years, probably plus 2 weeks to actually build this library that you're looking at. 10 years to finally learn how to use Tinderbox, 5 years to learn to really learn it, and then 2 weeks to actually write that library I just showed you. So what this library is doing is when I go to render this template, this particular note, what the library table is doing is it's saying, all right, go look at your children, look at this dictionary, find the attribute value, date, publication, and what name do I want the table column head to be rendered with? I want it to be rendered with date. Go find the text, render the column head with description. Go find the URL, render the column head with source. So now when I render that, I can quickly generate a output table of that particular item. And there's a number here because of the formatting issues if I have multiple items in a note. But that's something we can play with. So now I can quickly render a visual of what I just did. And if I was playing around with my client and they needed this really quickly, I could just copy this. Come on, let's go here. Let's go mail. Copy this. Open up a file and hit paste. And now I can mail it to them. So there's great ways to kind of quickly get this out, or I could easily just drop it into a Google Sheet or something like that and quickly get it over to the client if they're not playing with this. So this is, I found this, you know, a kind of a high level, really exciting way to do this. Now, what I really want to do though is start triaging out more of the insights out of this. And you'll notice that I have a attribute here called entity. And I use the term entity as the and Mr. Eddie David Eddy dropped, but you know, there's so many different words that one could refer to the concept of a organization. Is it a company? Is it a group? Is it an institution? Is it a government? Is it a enterprise? You know, so there's all these different words that you can refer to, you know, for that, and might using tabs as a delimiter and pasting into table view be worth considering? Yeah, it absolutely could be. You know, and yeah, absolutely. Um, um, yeah, that's let's revisit that in a minute. But so let me finish this up. So if I'm thinking about this word entity, over the years, I personally landed on, like, I don't like the term tag, so I use the term. And there's so many different words to refer to a enterprise, corporation, government, institution, nonprofit, whatever. I've rolled that all up into the term entity. And so now what I want to do is I want to say, hey, let's quickly go through this element, and let's do two things at once now that I'm looking at the data. And not only do I want to capture the companies, I'd also like to get a value for the impact. So then that tells me I want to go down here and quickly create another string called impact. All right, and we'll create that, and we'll go ahead and make it set because there might be multiple impacts. And so now I've got another attribute value for something I'm calling impact. And let's start the process. Now, here's where it gets super fun. So if I'm up on Tinderbox and you can't see my menus, for some reason, I tweaked some. Mark Bernstein, do you know on the Mac OS operating system, for some reason, I tweaked my OS settings so that the menu bar for apps aren't showing up on my primary display. See if I can switch that really quick.
Yeah, I know that's a setting.
Yeah, I just can't remember where I did it. I can do
I think you can also drag that, can't you?
yeah. I'll just do it. I'll just do this for now, so you can all see it. I'll fix it later. All right. So essentially, what I've done now is, you know, you can manually do this, and this is where you have to come up with a pattern for yourself. So, right now I've got 5 colors that I typically use, and I'll show you real quick. Here's my quick and dirty post-it note that I've generated that I stick on my computer. Basically, it says yellow is a point, red is an important point, blue is a person, green is a company, magenta is a quote, none is no color at all. And then Mr. Bernstein, based on my request this morning, this particular project, I would love to be able to get a few more colors. You know, yeah, from 10, I guess, but you know, I need a couple more colors to really do what I'm doing. And I know I can go and span it if I want to, but that has other process implications for me. But be that as it may, what you could do is, let's say for your particular work, you're going to say the impact is the color red. So you can go up and you can manually do it, go to highlight, and you make you highlight that as red. And as you see on my notes, so I don't screw up my muscle memory, I have companies being green. So you can go to format, highlight, green. And then this is where my particular thing happens. If I end up having to do something more than twice, I look for a way to automate it. And I try to get away from using menus, and you can do a bunch of hotkeys. The problem is I test with so many applications. You have varying hotkey implications, the hotkey conflict between apps. And this is something that Paul Walters taught me a couple years ago that just is really, really cool. So let me show you this. If people aren't aware of it. Settings. Where's my settings at? Come on. Okay, here it is. All right, so let's go and you guys see my settings app? No. There you go. Okay, so if you go to display, and you go to display settings. Come on. No, not display. Sorry, keyboard. Keyboard. And you go to keyboard shortcuts and you go to app shortcuts. You can create your own hotkeys for within the app. And so you'll see here, yellow highlight for me is the command control 1. And what you do essentially to do that is you just hit the little plus button, you click the app, you scroll down to Tinderbox, and you can look at Tinderbox and look at any name. So the actual name in the app. So like if this is speech, let's do speech just for fun. So it says start speaking. You see that? So if I'm in here and I type the word start speaking, right? And then I give it a hotkey, like, I don't know, like that, and hit done. Okay, so I've effectively now created that personal hotkey tied to that particular function in Tinderbox. So if I go up here and I manually did it, you'll now see that hotkey I just created is linked to that within Tinderbox. And if I type
including,
that has Tinderbox doing the speech.
including sensitive data from platforms,
Okay, so if I do this now and I hit the hotkey that I just created,
including sensitive data from
right?
platforms,
So that way I can automate the uses of the various Tinderbox functionalities. So this controlling of the keyboard hotkeys is really cool. Now, kind of taking this next far, I personally, I like my mouse, and there's a lot, there's 5 different keys I would need to do to be able to get the hotkey was really interesting. So this is the other thing I figured out. There is this is my mouse. I use the Logitech MX mouse, and it has a whole bunch of like little programmatical buttons on it. And take a look at what I did here. So in the app, I can go to the Tinderbox the application, and all of these different buttons I programmed to the hotkeys. So if I click on this one, this is going to be hotkey shift 1. So yellow, red, scroll up. If I click here, the scroll up is hotkey number 3, which for me is blue. The scroll down is hotkey number 2, hotkey number 4, which is green, and etc. So I've essentially programmed my mouse to trigger those hotkeys when I'm doing my reading. So that way, now watch what happens. I could be sitting here and I'm like, okay, here's Alibaba, and here's my mouse. So now all I have to do is roll down that roller right here on the screen. And if I click away, you'll see that it now made that green. So now I can quickly go through and analyze. I can say, okay, here's an impact. So I'm going to hit the red button. Here's a here's an impact. Don't see any company names there. Here's an impact. Don't see any company names there. So, there's a company impact. Whoops. Alibaba is a company. Impact. Go ahead and company. Oops. I don't see another company name. Impact. Okay, and then that might, and I might create another one. And this is why I need multiple attributes, Mark, because that might now be another attribute that I want to trigger towards for like attack vectors, right? So that's why I need like 10 or more colors, because I've got a bunch of different data points that I am implicating. Okay, and then we'll just go through and finish this one up. Okay, so let's and then that's actually a company name. All right, so now what we've done is we've gone through the notes, and as I was doing my reading and figuring them out. And let's also do, I have another one I call quotes, for example. So if I'm if I'm reading like a podcast, or if I'm calling through the notes that I do with one of my interviews, I've got another hotkey. It's the round button right here that I have on my mouse. I'll just highlight a bunch of text and I'll go like that. And then that turns that into a quote. And what I've also done for myself here is, so I don't mess up the original text, I put in a little caret there and I say quote : person. Right. So then that way, the person's name is tied there. The other thing I want to show you that I've done while I'm at this, if I go to note and I add another one in, we'll call it citation key. Go up here. We'll save just for sake of having that, just to have it. I'll show you that in just a second. So I'm going to also have a citation key associated with that particular note or activity. So now what I want, now that I've kind of done the reading and I then want to be able to this information. So what I do here is I go create another stamp. Extract highlights, and I'll say make the entity equal to text dot heights green, and I don't know if I need plus equal, but I'll just, can't hurt to put it in there. And I'll make the impact equal to text dot red. Okay, and now all we need to do is select each one of the notes. We populated impact and the entity into every one, and green is wrong, spelled wrong. And we can go and fix that. Okay, 1 billion record. Entity equals green, impact equals text. It's red. So why is entity getting 1 billion records? I don't know. Let's see. All right, let me clear this out. Sometimes when you make mistakes, we'll say text entity equals colon and impact equals colon. All right, and let's test on one before we do them all. Where's my highlights? Did I just delete my highlights? No, I did. Darn it. I just accidentally deleted that. So let's do it again. So entity equals highlights green. And we'll say impact equals text highlights red. All right. There we go. That's what we got. Okay, so I'm able to now automatically process out of my text those highlights that I just did. And I can do that individually for each one. And now that I know it works, I can select them all and go like that. And so now I've got the text and the impact for everyone done. And then if I wanted to, I could go back up to my note here and now say impact and entity okay, and now I can go ahead and change my table. So now here's the name of the breach, the date it happened, and its impact, and the organizations that were associated with it. So I had this ability to kind of quickly continue to refresh, and you'll notice what my my template's doing too is if there is more than one item, it's automatically putting numbered lists to it, so I can quickly see that breach had 3 organizations associated with it. This breach had 1 or 2 organizations associated with. So my and you'll also note too if there's dates automatically getting formatted. So I've got some other interesting elements that I played along with that. So that's another way to go about doing it. And then finally, you'll notice here, let me go ahead and because of that, fix that. You'll notice here, because of the dynamic linking library that I had previously installed as well, Tinderbox is automatically generating the notes from any item that's in the entities box. Plus, based on the conversation we were having earlier, it's automatically linking them. So now, not only while I'm doing my research, not only have I generated a table, not only have I parsed out the information, not only have I captured that information and populated it into attributes, those attribute values based on my dynamic linking library is automatically generating and populating those lists. Now, here's where it gets really interesting too. If you'll notice earlier, I tweaked the library. So if I go here, and I now say the citation. And this is where the flexibility of Tinderbox really comes into play. The citation. And I can say here, if the citation equals this, then I want citation key be path be citation. Okay. And then if I go up to my P note code, my stamps, on Keynote. And now this is where I can tweak my linking code. And I say citation colon plus citation key. So now what I can do by doing that, you'll notice in one of these, which one was it? Yeah. And this one, I had included the citation key Becker 25. So what that does is when it's generating, by tweaking my dynamic linking library code really quickly, by adding in that extra variable on the fly, I can now go down to like WeChat, and if I add in the citation key in the notes, okay. Oh, I got to refresh the. Oh no, it's entity. Got it. Sorry. P entity. Go to P entity. Where is it? There you go. There. With WeChat, you'll see that not only is the note being created, the source is being automatically populated as well. Likewise, the link to the note that generated that entity was created. So then this can be really, really effective. So by doing this, what I found yesterday when I was interviewing my the person I'm helping write the book for, I said, "What did you mean by this term in one of the interviews you did?" And he said, "Well, I can't give me the context." And so I was using Tinderbox me back to the original note that stimulated that idea. And then I was able to actually read out the entire sentence to where he had first used that term. And then we were able to have a really deep conversation around it. So, essentially what I've essentially spent the last 45 minutes doing is showing you how I spent time to pre-configure my process in, and have developed this kind of collection and curation methodology to help me with my research, which will then ultimately lead towards more creation, collaboration, and then the ability for me to publish and push my my material out in any different ways. So a ton more I could, but out of time for today. So let me pause there. Thoughts, comments, reactions. Just answer any questions you have. What do you mean?
No, there's, I was fiddling around actually while you were wrapping up. I was trying to find a way that you could just use the Mac. So if you have Tinderbox's the toolbar, I think it is visible. You'll see the little Mac color wheel, and if you have that wheel open, you can select any text and you can click on one of the swatches, and it will change the color of the text to that. So you have unlimited choice in the color of the text. I think highlights are something completely different, and each
No,
app,
highlights is different. Highlight color of
yeah.
the text HTML highlighted HTML background. And so those two are
I'm sorry, it might be just me. I have the worst internet connection, but you're losing most of what you're saying. I'm sorry.
yeah. So there's two properties you're talking about there. One is the color of the font, and a highlight is actually HTML background color. So there's font
Oh,
color.
that's how it's implemented in
Yeah,
Tinderbox. Okay.
that's how it's
Okay,
implemented.
okay, I
So
get it.
background color
I
is
get it.
highlighted.
You learn something every day. Okay. Okay. I get
Right.
it now.
So
Yeah.
no, so this is so again, and you can do this methodology with, like we talked about tech tags and terms in the beginning of the call. You're seeing I'm doing that same methodology now with company names or with
Hmm.
breach impacts. An attribute's an attribute. It doesn't matter what you call it. It just depends on what information's in there. What's the format of that information? Is it a date? Is it a list? Is it a set? Is it a URL? And
Mhm.
I'll leave you one final thing to think about. One final thing to think about while you're doing this is to realize that sometimes when you're parsing text, there may be regex related special characters in that text, such as an asterisk, brackets, forward or back, especially forward slashes like note names. And if you find that the methodology I've been demonstrating with you is not working, more often than not, it's probably because you're encountering some special character that the Tinderbox processor is getting hung up on because of the regex. And so what you do with that is you just do a dot replace, especially like $signs do. You just do a dot replace that special character with some other type of delimiter, and then replace it at the end of the process. So
We
those are,
went through this 2 weeks ago, Michael,
yeah,
on the meetup.
but
Yeah, that was great. Yeah.
But this kind of shows you from and the value of the installer capabilities that Mr. Bernstein's given us. If you go down that
Mhm.
path, I've spent probably 4 or 5 months building these 5 or 6 modules that I use, my tables, my list generation, and all of that. And now that I've got it,
Mhm.
I don't even have to think about the code anymore. I can just focus completely on doing my writing and my research.
Yeah, it's great. And not to force a plug from you or anything, but haven't you made some of these available on one of your sites or something like that? I
Hey,
remember.
you're never forcing a plug. It's always great. Let me pull it up. Yeah, let me grab my browser here. Yeah, so all of these libraries are available here at
Do
my,
drop it in the chat too, and I'll just pull
they're
it from
available
there.
here on my 5 Cs of knowledge management. And then when the Winterfest comes around, I'll be offering some kind of package deal through Winterfest, which I believe it's a little early, but Winterfest is end of June, early July, something like that. Or Summerfest, I should say. Summerfest. So
Summerfest.
yeah, so Summerfest will be end of June, early July, at which point I'll probably launch another Tinderbox training cohort and make the whole publishing system available.
Sorry, guys, doesn't Summerfest also typically have this app that does a lot of good visualization, like graphing and things like that?
Summerfest has got a ton of cool apps. Over the time I've ended up buying
Right.
nearly. But yeah,
Yeah.
so it's interesting how our conversation started with really simple, tag generation, note generation, and ended with a complex example of doing the same thing. But hopefully you all found this of interest and value today. Awesome. And that was just one of like 10 really cool things I did this week. One more, if you don't mind me showing you, is and then I'll let you go, is because I'm doing a lot of these confidential interviews, I was able to use chat. Let me find chat. And chat has taught me how to find it. Yeah, long story short, chat has taught me how to use the Whisper. OpenAI has launched the let me show you. OpenAI has launched the Whisper, and this is something for next week if you guys are interested, because we're out of time today. But OpenAI has launched the WhisperX, and WhisperX is a local model that can be used to convert WAV files and to transcode them into text. And then if you go to Hugging Face, and combine that with the Pi, yeah, combine it with Pi note diarization. What that allows you to do is, rather than using like Otter AI or ChatGPT or some other public large language model utility, you can install the diarization and the Whisper AI utility. And what that allows you to do is this. Let me pull this up. And I can go down here now. What's my whisper? Is let me find it here. Oh no, it's got to find it in text. There we go. Okay, I'll have to find it later for you. I can do it later. But what that allows me to do is from Tinderbox, I can now send I can do an audio recording, and from that audio recording I get an MP4 file. I put that the MP4 file name and its path in the Tinderbox attributes. I then can send that MP4 file to another plugin called FFmpeg, which dynamically converts that MP4 into a WAV file, which then automatically then passes that file to WhisperX. And then using a Python script, which ChatGPT taught me how to do this week, that triggers the WhisperX process, converts that audio file into a transcript, and then using the Hugging Face diarization I showed you, automatically then diarizes all the speaker names, speaker 1, speaker 2, speaker 3. I then can do another step using the command line to pull that text file that it generated into Tinderbox, and for like a 90-minute, takes about an hour and a half for the whole process to work for a 90-minute interview. And and all I need to do is paste the MP4 file name into Tinderbox, hit a rule or hit a Boolean that I've set up called is diarize. And about 90 minutes later, the text of the note shows up with a completely diarized transcription of the interview I just had with that person. I then go through that entire interview, highlighting it the way we talked about and parsing it out. And now I've got a completely curated reaction to that interview. And that's, if you guys are interested, I could prepare and show that whole process next week or the week after.
Please.
Yeah. Awesome.
Cool.
All right, everybody. Hope you enjoyed it.
All right. Yeah, it was awesome. Thanks so much, Michael. Have a great weekend, guys.
See you later. Bye.
Till next time.
Bye.